Viewer discretion is advised.
And you heard it right there with your own two ears. A-Bomb has two teams. Wow, this is a guy who praises. I mean, let's face it, this is a guy who's worn a Dallas Cowboy jersey, who's bought a Dallas Cowboys jersey, and has his name and has it hanging up, who's worn a Dallas Cowboy jersey, who's worn a Dallas Cowboy jersey.
Until you back up your claims with something that's actual tangible evidence, bruh, you're a fucking fraud.
Well, I'm packing up my game and I'ma head out west, where real women come equipped with scripts and fake press. Find a nest in the hills, chill like Flint. Buy an old drop top, find a spot to pimp. Then I'm a kid, rock it up and down your block with a bottle of scotch and watch lots of crotch. Buy a yacht with a flag saying chillin' the most. Then rock that bitch up and down the coast. Give a toast to the sun, drink with the stars. Get thrown in the mix and tossed out of bars. Sip the Tijuana, I wanna roam. Find Motown, telling fools to come back home. Start an escort service for all the right reasons, and set up shop at the top of Four Seasons. Kid rockin', I'm the real McCoy, and I'm headed out west, sucker, because I wanna be a cowboy, baby. With a top left back and the sunshine shining. Cowboy, baby. West Coast chillin' with the boom. I wanna be a cowboy, baby. Riding at night 'cause I sleep all day. Cowboy, baby. I can smell the beat from a mile away. I bet you'll hear my whistle blowing when my train rolls in. It goes like dust in the wind. I once was lost, but now I'm just blind. Palm trees and weeds, scab knees and rice. Get a map to the stars, find Heidi flights. And if the price is right, then I'm gonna make my bid, boy, and let California hate. Nobody call me a cowboy, baby. With a top left back and the sunshine shining. Cowboy, baby. West Coast chillin' with the boom. I wanna be a cowboy, baby. Riding at night 'cause I sleep all day. Cowboy, baby. I can smell the beat from a mile away. Yeah, Kid Rock, you can call me Tex. Rolling sunset woman with a bottle of Bex. Seen a slippy in a bed, rolled down my glass and said, yeah, it is right, yo. No kid gun swinging spurs in the floor. Call me horse, I'm the boss with the sauce and the horse. No remorse for the sheriff, it is I ain't right. I'm a paid his town red, that paid his wife white. Cause chaos rock like I'm a
Until you back up your claims with something that's actual tangible evidence, bruh, you're a fucking fraud.
Exposed, 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 exposed.
Okay, this would have been number one because this place, though hard to admit, is very nice, but does have a few pinch points in the stadium and encourages spectators to use the outside to get to different sections, which on a hot day makes one uninclined to walk in the scorching Texas sun. However, the atmosphere, despite it being the Cowboys, is amazing. The structural engineering involved to hold up the roof is also top-notch. Ugh, that hurts. It's an amazing stadium, but sorry, Jerry, it's not number one. Hidden in between the Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer glory years and the Bill Parcells autocratic regime, Dave Campo led a subpar Dallas squad for 3 years. And you really have to admire his consistency. 5-11 in 2000, 5-11 in 2001, and 5-11 in 2002. Campo got dealt a bad hand with quarterbacks like Quincy Carter, Chad Hutchinson, and Ryan Leaf, but he looked more lost on the sidelines than Nate Robinson in a boxing ring. The Bears of the mid-'80s make another appearance on this list, blanking the Cowboys in Dallas and putting up 44 in the process. The Bears went up 17-0 in this one before they even needed to score an offensive touchdown. I'm sure Scooter would still have predicted a Super Bowl win for the Cowboys that year.
This is our year. This is when we put it all together. Super Bowl number 6, here we come, baby.
Your playoff record since the 90s is as appalling as Mike McCarthy's time management. Everyone hates you, even the weatherman.
It's looking a little bit like those Dallas Cowboys is peaking in the 90s.
Every year, it's your year. Every year you find some way to fuck it up. But yes, you are realistic. Trayvon Diggs had all those picks, but was brutalized in coverage like this cart barreling through your employees. And let us never forget the sweet, sweet ending to last year's season.
America's team led the decade in regular season wins and winning percentage. They won 2 Super Bowls and appeared in 5. They made 7 conference championship games and missed the playoffs only once. The only thing preventing them from ruling the decade was their 3 Super Bowl losses. In particular, their 2 Super Bowl losses to Pittsburgh, which were by a combined 8 points. If not for a couple of possessions in those 2 games, it would be the Steelers in this spot instead. Dallas. The Dallas Cowboys are the most overrated franchise in sports. Every year we are subjected to your shitty, overrated, mediocre team on national television 7 to 8 times. If I had a nickel for every time the camera panned to Jerry Jones' decaying corpse in his press box, I would have more money than Jeff Bezos. Congrats on your success in the 70s and 90s, but what have you done since Tupac died? 3 playoff wins in the last 24 years. 3. The Texans have more playoff wins than you in that span, and they didn't even exist until 2002. Mark Sanchez has more playoff wins than you in that span. Yes, he of butt fumble fame. And yet, there you are, on national television just to finish 500 or worse. I'm sick of it. Tony Romo never won shit and was a choker. Dak Prescott only does well against shitty teams. Zeke Elliott is a fat slob. Michael Irvin almost killed a teammate with scissors. Emmitt Smith is a moron, and your team employed Greg Hardy after all his bullshit was known to the public. Your first round pick this year, Micah Parsons, is a certified weirdo. McCarthy is your head coach, so unless you have Aaron Rodgers on your roster, you aren't winning shit anytime soon. Rowdy Cowboys. Rowdy looks like he just got a prostate exam. I mean, seriously, what the hell is up with his face? He's smiling, but it's a desperate looking smile that says, "I'm being held hostage, call the police." If you painted his face white, gave him some red lipstick and green hair, he would be a dead ringer for the Joker. But I'm talking about the shitty Jared Leto Joker, not the super awesome Heath Ledger Joker. Rating, 2 out of 10. Dallas Cowboys, Roger Staubach. Troy Aikman has the rings, but not the stats. Tony Romo has the stat, but not the rings. Staubach had both. The 6-time Pro Bowler and 2-time Super Bowl champion somehow was never named first-team All-Pro, despite his consistently excellent numbers and efficiency for his era. Staubach's volume totals aren't overwhelming due to the era he played in, and the fact that he got a late start thanks to his military service. Respect the troops, but he played a huge role in Dallas becoming America's team, and in addition to winning almost 75% of his starts, he played with a flair for the dramatic and was exciting. Dallas Cowboys, Chad Hutchinson. Hutchinson was extremely versatile. He was terrible at pro baseball, so he decided to play pro football, and he was terrible there as well. He played just 2 years in Dallas, and was in a QB competition the entire time with a slightly less shitty but still very shitty quarterback in Quincy Carter. Either way, Hutchinson finished his Cowboys career with 7 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and a 2-7 record. How about them Cowboys, am I right? Dallas has had so many hilarious playoff collapses, it's hard to pick just one, but I went with 2007. Dallas was 7-point home favorites over an upstart New York Giants team, who Dallas had beaten twice in the regular season on their way to a 13-3 record. Dallas had 13 Pro Bowlers and looked destined to reach the Super Bowl, but their elite offense went scoreless on their last 4 drives, including 3 while trailing 21-17. The game ended on a desperation Romo interception in the end zone. Such a Dallas Cowboys, Tyron Smith. Many think Ezekiel Elliott should be here, but in my opinion, a lot of people realize Zeke is overpaid and think he sucks, so therefore he's not overrated. That leaves Smith, who has missed a lot of time with injuries since 2016 and is still prone to penalties. He's no longer an elite player despite his reputation. Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott. Expecting overrating Troy Aikman? Well, I think everybody already thinks Aikman is overrated, so in my opinion, how can you be overrated if everybody thinks you're overrated? Also, Aikman had several monster playoff runs to win rings. What has Dak done? He has a lot of supporters and is viewed as an elite quarterback by many, despite having a history of fattening his stats against bad teams while struggling against good ones. Dak is a good quarterback, a very good quarterback even, but he's not elite, and being Dallas' starting quarterback gives him more primetime exposure than he deserves. DalLass Cowboys, Micah Parsons. This was truly a toss-up between the consistently excellent All-Pro guard Zach Martin and the All-Pro phenom / weirdo Micah Parsons. Martin will be a Hall of Famer someday, but right now I decided to go with Parsons since it's much more rare to see a defensive rookie come into the NFL and immediately dominate. Parsons is going to be a terror to try and block for many years to come, and also in the locker room. I can't wait to watch them both lose before the conference championship game again this year. Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott. Much like his predecessor Tony Romo, Dak has far outplayed his initial draft status, but it still hasn't been enough to get Dallas to an NFC championship game. Dak is paid like an elite quarterback, but he falls just short of that standard. He excels at putting up great stats against shit teams and disappointing you against good teams. Verdict: overrated. Dallas Cowboys. Last year, the Cowboys went 12-5, drafted one of the best defensive rookies in NFL history, who is a certified weirdo, and please don't look up his hazing practices when he was at Penn State. But guess what? Despite all of this, they still belly flopped the moment they got into the playoffs, surprising absolutely nobody. This team has not done anything since 1995, and yet every year 31 other fan bases have to endure watching Jerry Jones's team soak up all the attention on talk shows and get 100 primetime games. For what? All just to miss the playoffs or lose early in the playoffs? This is the most overrated franchise in all of professional sports. The Jacksonville Jaguars are an absolute joke, and even they have made 3 conference championship games since America's team last made one. The Jaguars! Dak is not elite, and he will never lead this team to a Super Bowl, and if you are one of the millions of morons who root for this team, you are responsible for them getting so much attention they haven't earned, and you can all kiss the fattest part of my succulent ass.
We're going to wish that we executed better, but just wasn't quite good enough today.
Mike McCarthy, numbers-wise, is a successful head coach. He's won a Super Bowl and is winning games for the Cowboys. However, if you bring his name up to both fan bases, the reaction you usually get is contempt, frustration, and a general dislike of him.
All the bad decisions, Mike McCarthy, and I call them bad decisions, not mistakes. Those were bad decisions. Should have been prepared for them.
Why is this? Most winning coaches are revered by franchises, with their fans choosing to forget the bad times. But when it comes to Mike McCarthy, it seems like the good times never happened. The answer to why Mike McCarthy is so disliked is coming up. Who is Mike McCarthy? McCarthy hails from what was once football's most fertile soil, the land of Montana. No, not actual Montana, Western Pennsylvania, where Dan Marino, Mike Ditka, Joe Namath, and Joe Montana is from. His father was a police officer, a firefighter, and a bartender. His dad's collar was always blue, but Mike was raised on the black and gold. McCarthy found a role model in Steelers coach Chuck Noll, a man who was calm on the sideline and stayed out of the spotlight. He figured he would emulate the 4-time Super Bowl champion. We'll see about that. As a player, McCarthy was an all-conference tight end at Baker University, but it was pretty clear that if he was going to make it to the NFL, he would have to coach. After a couple college gigs, McCarthy was hired by the Chiefs and Marty Schottenheimer as an offensive quality control coach, which translates loosely to a guy who tells the offense not to commit turnovers. It was there that McCarthy teamed up with the first quarterback under his watch, fellow Pennsylvanian Joe Montana. He was promoted to quarterbacks coach, starting a long line of him working with Hall of Fame QBs. And no, Cowboys fam, Dak Prescott is not on that list. Mike McCarthy would move on to Green Bay, where he worked with an incredibly talented, prolific QB with a cannon arm. No, not Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre. And this was before Favre tried to steal from the poorest people in Mississippi to build a volleyball court. After reverse Robin Hood won an MVP, McCarthy leveled up to OC with the Saints. And then in 2005 landed in San Francisco as their OC, where McCarthy nearly ruined #1 overall pick Alex Smith. Oh, you might have forgotten about that. Yet somehow, Mike McCarthy was able to fail upwards and get his first head coaching gig. It was time to return to Green Bay. The big turnaround. A lot of Green Bay fans are still upset that Aaron Rodgers only has one Super Bowl ring. But how quickly both them and the world forget just how bad the Packers were before Mike McCarthy arrived. McCarthy inherited a 4-12 team with a precarious quarterback situation. The starter was 37-year-old Brett Favre, with first-round pick Aaron Rodgers waiting for his chance. McCarthy's first year was a respectable 8-8, and then a resurgence in 2008 put him on the map. A 13-3 season, the NFC Championship game at home. But then Brett Favre couldn't stop himself from being himself. That bitter ending distracts from the fact that McCarthy procured maybe the best season of Favre's career. Had Tom Brady not thrown 50 touchdowns and gone undefeated in 2007, Favre would have won his 4th MVP at the age of 38. What should have been a feel-good ride off into the sunset season for Favre instead ended with an ugly divorce. The Packers shipped Favre to the Jets, and in most controversial fashion, they had officially moved on to the Rodgers era in Green Bay. McCarthy and Rodgers. We all know the trajectory that Rodgers followed in his first 4 years. After sitting behind Favre, he went from an impressive young player to holding his own with Kurt Warner in the playoffs to winning Super Bowl MVP to winning league MVP. The question is, how much of Rodgers' development can be attributed to Mike McCarthy? It takes a village to raise a quarterback, but before Rodgers, McCarthy proved he had the right stuff when he developed young guns like Matt Hasselbeck, Aaron Brooks, and Jake Delhomme. Yeah, people forget about this. Those are 2 Super Bowl starting QBs. The change with Rodgers was visible, and there's evidence that McCarthy had a hand in unlocking A-Rod's full potential as a passer. All you need to do is watch Rodgers in college versus his first year as a starter to see the significant development that took place under McCarthy's watch. It was on full display in the winter of 2011 when the wildcard Packers marched through the NFC side of the playoffs and took down McCarthy's childhood team, the Steelers, in Super Bowl 45. Rodgers was the easy pick for MVP, playing a near flawless game. Mike McCarthy had achieved the pinnacle of his coaching career. He turned around a franchise in turmoil and brought them glory. He was loved in Green Bay, but soon things wouldn't be so great. The downfall. Before the 2015 season and just a few months after Green Bay's catastrophic NFC Championship game loss in Seattle, Rodgers told Peter King, "I desperately wanted to be coached." When the Pack let go of McCarthy after posting a 125-77 record in 13 seasons as their head coach, it came down more than anything to an inability to coexist with Rodgers. McCarthy had given Rodgers the green light to change the play at the line of scrimmage, but also complained that Rodgers' constant audibles kept him from finding a rhythm as a play caller. There were also reports that McCarthy didn't have an open door policy for his players in Green Bay and that the culture suffered because of it. It was also speculated that McCarthy fired QB coach Alex Van Pelt because McCarthy wanted more credit for Rodgers' success at the position. Before he was fired, McCarthy was eventually blamed for wasting Rodgers' career in Green Bay, but given the power of hindsight, we know that even super coach Matt LaFleur has been unable to guide Rodgers back to the Super Bowl despite 3 straight 13-win seasons. Rodgers has flourished to the tune of back-to-back MVPs, but in Green Bay, the only trophies that matters are the silver ones. And ain't nobody give a damn about chakras. Perhaps McCarthy was holding things together better than we think. We'll never know. As the tide turned against McCarthy and friction grew, he was fired all the same. The second act. After a year off, the Dallas Cowboys brought in McCarthy to replace the clapper, Jason Garrett. The hiring was stigmatized immediately, and any early success was attributed to offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. The Cowboys fell apart in 2020 after the injury to Dak Prescott, and 2 years later, Prescott once again finds himself on the sideline. Yet in the one season he's had a healthy QB, McCarthy delivered 12 wins, including 1 with Cooper Rush, and an NFC East title, helping oversee the top-scoring offense in the NFL. But that's not enough for Cowboys fans, and it never will be. McCarthy has had the weight of expectations heaped upon him in his head coaching career, going from Titletown to America's team. Had McCarthy worked his magic in Jacksonville, Tennessee, or Houston, he wouldn't be subjected to half the scrutiny he's gotten in two of the league's most iconic organizations. He wouldn't have Skip Bayless devoting precious airtime to his ineptitude as a decision maker. He wouldn't have been on HBO's Hard Knocks for the world to dissect. Sports Illustrated wouldn't have devoted pages to his tense relationship with his quarterback. But of course, McCarthy has made plenty of wrong decisions as head coach, whether or not he's under the microscope. McCarthy told the press that he spent the entire 2019 season learning about analytics? All of that time spent on data-driven decisions, and the Cowboys still met a shameful fate in the 2021 wild card round. With just 14 seconds to get a game-winning touchdown, McCarthy drew up a QB draw with no timeouts, and it backfired, leading to the Cowboys' unceremonious exit in the first round. You could make the argument that the blunder was also on Dak, but it's just as easy to say McCarthy shouldn't have put him in that position. In 2022, that's our lasting image of Mike McCarthy as a head coach. It's not the Super Bowl title or the 10 playoff appearances or the overwhelmingly positive win-loss record. It's his face getting clowned by Nickelodeon. Despite his success and getting Cooper Rush to win games, he was still listed as plus 600 as the first head coach to be fired in 2022. So why is Mike McCarthy so disliked? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe he's not young and handsome enough. Maybe he just comes off as an adult who doesn't know what he's doing, even though that's really unfair. At the end of the day, the NFL is a business of what have you done for me lately. Even more so in Dallas, though that doesn't explain how Jason Garrett stuck around for so long.
Proved just how much a gamble can pay off. On February 25th, 1989, he bought the Dallas Cowboys as they were in the midst of some tough times. He replaced franchise cornerstones Tom Landry and Tex Schramm with Jimmy Johnson and himself. Led by Michael Irvin and first overall pick Troy Aikman, Dallas stumbled out of the gate to a one-win season, but quickly got some help. An infusion of talent headlined by Emmitt Smith graced the Cowboys thanks to one of the NFL's most brilliant trades ever. What holes they couldn't patch through the draft, they fixed elsewhere. Tight end Jay Novacek came over in free agency. And when San Francisco grew tired of his antics, Charles Haley joined Dallas via trade. Alongside Leon Lett and Russell Maryland, Haley helped turn the defense into a terror. Running the ball was made far easier behind the Great Wall of Dallas. Eric Williams further solidified a line led by Mark Tuinei and Nate Newton, which meant Smith was able to do as he pleased. As a bonus, he had Daryl Johnston paving the way. And in just the fourth season with Jones at the helm, the Cowboys put it all together. They blew out the Bills for the franchise's first Lombardi trophy since Super Bowl 12. A year later, they did it again, same opponent and all. After a coaching change that we'll get to later and an early exit thanks to the eventual champs, Jones showed he wasn't content with just 2 Super Bowls. He brought in Deion Sanders, upgrading an already stout secondary led by Darren Woodson. And after a 4th straight season of at least 12 wins, Dallas won Jerry a 3rd Super Bowl. He had turned the franchise around and put them in position to keep rolling. But about that. Barely a month after Super Bowl 30, part of what defined America's team once again spilled into public view: dysfunction. On March 3rd, 1996, Dallas police entered a hotel room that contained, among other things, lots of weed, plenty of coke, a pair of self-employed models, and Michael Irvin. When the cops entered, the first thing Irvin offered was, "Can I tell you who I am?" He was a national champion with Jimmy Johnson's Miami Hurricanes. He was Tom Landry's final first-round pick. As Jeff Pearlman put it in Boys Will Be Boys, he was the reason for the Cowboys dynasty. The police didn't need an introduction, but Irvin knew that. This is the guy who once said, "My greatest asset is my ego." If there was a personification of the Dallas Cowboys other than Jerry Jones, it had to be Irvin. And as he sat in the hotel room 2 days before his 30th birthday, there couldn't be a more obvious omen for the franchise. But one of the women claimed possession of everything in the room. Irvin made a plea deal and avoided a prison sentence. He dodged an extortion attempt from an alleged rando, then a murder plot by the boyfriend of the woman who took the fall. But Irvin couldn't slip past a suspension from Commissioner Tagliabue. Their title defense took another hit when Russell Maryland left for Oakland. He was the latest of many examples as to what the NFL's recently introduced free agency could do to a team as talented as the Cowboys. But with his first-hand experience, Maryland knew Dallas could get through whatever obstacles they set in their own way. The money saved by letting the defensive tackle walk was then put straight into their running back's pocket. Smith was extended on a massive deal that included a record signing bonus, but it was a little less eye-popping when compared to the similar-sized stacks of cash given to Aikman and Sanders. Jones was investing in his team and looked to lock up the nucleus that had brought him success. He was just banking on the hope that everyone could stay healthy, happy, and at the top of their game. The bad news, it didn't play out like that. But the following year, they did manage to win the NFC East, so there's that. It just came amidst further drama. They spent the 1996 season working around an ongoing beef between their franchise quarterback and head coach. Whether it was trust issues stemming from that or a 3-time Super Bowl hangover, the offense took a major step back. And in December, the defense they had to lean on more than normal lost one of their anchors due to a drug-related suspension. With all that, they somehow managed a wild-card win over the Vikings, but then came up short against Carolina. For the first time in 5 years, they failed to make the NFC Championship game. Part of the struggle came from the fact that they were without their star tight end for the entire year. Novacek had missed the season due to a degenerative disc in his lower back, and during the offseason, Aikman's safety valve decided to call it a career. Along with him went Haley, who, despite all of his off-the-field stunts, had given Dallas what it needed for success. Losing a leader from both sides of the ball was a tough pill to swallow, and Jones was doing what he could to not let the train slip off the tracks. But preventing derailment can be costly. Jerry locked up Daryl Johnston to a massive deal. For context, here's how it compared to the extension signed by Irvin just 2 years prior. That was gifted to Moose without many competing offers coming his way. Jones said simply, "We owed him that contract." And as Peter King put it, it was a giant step for an organization that was otherwise spiraling. Johnston himself added, "I think there's a feeling among the guys in the weight room that the bad days are over for us." Moose! Sorry, bud. They're not. Not long before the season kicked off, Barry Switzer was arrested for having a handgun in his luggage at the airport. That was added to a list of complaints against Switzer, including those expressed from Aikman directly to the team's owner, as well as incidents like Switzer getting flagged for contact with an official that helped seal their defeat in the '94 NFC Championship. The arrest kicked off a season where the Cowboys were truly spiraling. Their offense was a mess, due in part to some career-threatening injuries to some of the guys who had kept Aikman clean and let Smith rack up rushing titles. A knee injury to Mark Tuinei shortened his season and led to his retirement in the offseason. It was another crack in the Great Wall. Even with the behemoth Larry Allen filling some of the void, the Cowboys struggled to score and therefore struggled to win. It was the first losing season of Switzer's coaching career, and his last season in Dallas. With that, he resigned, and Jerry made it clear that he wasn't pleased with what the coach had done to his team. But Switzer would have had to have been perfect to keep Jones happy. Jerry had been looking to prove a point with the position of head coach. The Cowboys had become the success that they were because of Jones, not whoever was coaching the team. And while Switzer had to fall on the sword of dysfunction, it was his predecessor that helped cause the storm. Jimmy Johnson was by Jones's side as the Cowboys were rebuilt. He did more than his share in getting them into Super Bowl form. And in Jones's eyes, he got more than his share of the credit. In a now famous alcohol-fueled interaction with some sports writers, Jerry made his feelings clear. Johnson didn't do anything that any other coach couldn't do. He could bring anyone else in and have success. But Johnson had his own thoughts on the matter. While Jerry was the one who signed the checks, Johnson made sure they were getting the most out of the players. In his mind, this was his team, and he'd coach for as long as he felt like it, allegedly telling Jones as much on a flight home following a win. It was no surprise that they couldn't find a way to keep working together, and a split became necessary. So when Switzer walked into the organization, it was egos from top to bottom, and when he left, not much had changed. Well, I sort of take that back. One thing did change. They had a happy quarterback again. On February 12th, 1998, the unheralded Chan Gailey was announced as the new head coach. Aikman said that the hire was a sign of good things ahead, a statement he likely would have made even if Jerry had named himself coach. And there were those that believed this move was actually Jones doing just that. His love of football plus his confidence in himself had led Jones to be more hands-on than most in his position. But few had had the success that graced Jerry almost immediately. It's easy to understand why he believed this team ran through him. Credit is due for the success, but also for the drama that this team, much like Jones, had a flair for. And unfortunately, that was again on display during the 1998 offseason. Offensive lineman Everett McIver was getting his haircut during training camp when Irvin rolled in. The receiver shouted seniority and expected McIver to get out of the chair. With teammates standing around, Irvin continued yelling at McIver, who eventually got up and shoved him. After even Leon Lett couldn't break them up, McIver punched Irvin in the mouth. That's when the wide receiver grabbed a pair of scissors and slashed McIver across the neck, leaving a room full of their teammates silent. The offensive lineman would be all right after a hospital stay, and thanks to Jerry, Irvin avoided criminal charges. Plus, a judge ruled that this didn't violate the terms of the wide receiver's probation that stemmed from the hotel incident. My favorite part is the judge calling it playful. And for Dallas, the drama didn't end once football began. In week 2, Aikman suffered a broken collarbone during a blowout loss against the Broncos. The Cowboys were forced to lean on backup Jason Garrett, who actually handled himself pretty well. As far as what they could do on the field, this was a good team. Dion proved he was still primetime, Smith got back on track for his best season since their last Super Bowl run, and Aikman returned halfway through the year to show what Gailey's offense was capable of. They became the first NFC East team to ever sweep the division. Those 8 wins helped Dallas get back into the playoffs. But against the rival Cardinals on Wild Card weekend, third time was the charm for Arizona. Dallas was left with even more questions about their future. Aikman admitted to the natural shifts of the NFL, how this wasn't the team it used to be. Sanders added that no one should be happy with how they played, and said it's time for some guys to step up or step out. One of the guys who chose the latter was Nate Newton. The career-long Cowboy had seen age get the better of him, and instead of sticking around for a backup role, opted to join Carolina. The Great Wall had crumbled, and the team's on-field identity was in trouble. Their off-field identity remained well intact though, once again thanks to Lett. It was the third time since 1995 that substance abuse violations would keep him off the field. But hopes somehow remained high, and expectations hadn't changed for this team. The start of the 1999 season looked like they were capable of another run. It's just they're getting a collapse episode for a reason. While visiting Philadelphia in week 5, in the first quarter, Michael Irvin caught a pass as he had 749 other times in his career. Trying to avoid a helmet-to-helmet hit, he came down awkwardly on the artificial turf. With little padding between Irvin and the cement beneath the turf, he suffered a cervical spinal cord injury. And as the Eagles crowd cheered, the stretcher was brought out. Just that morning, the Philadelphia Inquirer published a piece by Phil Sheridan that credited the job Jones and the Cowboys organization had done in maintaining the triplets. But that snap would be the last of Irvin's career. And with the trio down to 2, the Cowboys got a glimpse of their future just a few weeks later. Aikman suffered another concussion. Smith broke a bone in his hand. And for the first time since 1988, the Cowboys would be without all 3 of their biggest stars. That was on top of a neck injury to Daryl Johnston, which, being his second in 3 seasons, meant his time as a Cowboy was also over. While Moose was never going to threaten Emmett for touches, he was a leader of the team and beloved by the organization as well as the fan base. The team was suddenly becoming unrecognizable. They managed to sneak into the playoffs at 8-8, but it was over quickly against the Vikings. And from there, things started to speed up. Right after the early exit, Jerry chased another coach out of town. He promoted longtime defensive coach Dave Campo, then once again gambled for the future by sending 2 first-round picks to Seattle in exchange for Joey Galloway. Upon arrival, he received a massive deal in hopes of filling the void at wide receiver. But that meant they had to save cash elsewhere, and Sanders played the victim. Primetime had showed up and kept the good times going, but was quickly another big name moving on. Things only got worse with Campo as head coach. After the first of 3 straight 5-11 seasons, some of the last remnants of those Super Bowl teams found new homes. Eric Williams moved on to the Ravens. Leon Lett became a Bronco. And the team made the tough but expected decision to say farewell to their franchise quarterback. Dallas waived Aikman the day before a 7-year, $70 million extension would have kicked in. A month later, injuries forced him to officially retire, but he'd still be on the books for nearly 15% of the Cowboys' salary cap. The highlight of the Campo era came when Smith broke Walter Payton's record for career rushing yards. But even one of the greatest careers a running back has ever had wouldn't be enough to save Smith. Like everyone else, time had caught up to Emmett. He'd averaged nearly 350 touches per season over his 13 years as a Cowboy, and that's before adding postseason play. As a result, his effectiveness slowed in a way that mirrored the direction of Dallas. After yet another coaching change, Smith's time as a Cowboy was over. And other than Jerry, only one name remained from that first Super Bowl team. Darren Woodson managed just one more season before a herniated disc led to his retirement at the end of 2004. With that, the dynasty was officially over. By the time Woodson played his last snap, the Cowboys were 10 games below 500 since their last Super Bowl. And now, Jones had no one left to share the credit or the blame. He was left to pick up the pieces and try to resurrect the franchise for a second time. After chasing championships, big names, and anyone who got in his way, he'd get to try it all again. But through the hard times, the success still shined bright, even with all the distractions that piled up along the way. The collapse of America's team, it felt massive, but only because of how incredible their time on top truly was.
I might have to run this back, so we're listening to this when the Cowboys pick. When we get Surtain, I'm just like, anyone but Patrick Surtain. It is
the Denver Broncos select Pat Surtain Jr.
Come on, man! Bro! What the heck is this? Anyone take